So the Premier League season is finally over, with Antonio Conte's Chelsea side lifting the trophy. As we brace ourselves for months without Premier League footy, it's time to reflect on the season that was by grading each team's performance, starting from the bottom to the top. Bottom of the pile was Sunderland, and we can't give them anything other than an F. It was an abysmal season from start to finish for the Black Cats, both on and off the pitch, and it all started when Sam Allardyce walked out to take the England job. Owner Ellis Short hasn't offered the financial backing needed to keep them in the top flight. The majority of players fail to show any fight that's needed in a relegation battle, and then David Moyes sucked out any energy that was still left in the club. While Moyes' resignation gives fans one thing to be thankful for, it's time to prepare for a tough season in the Championship. Middlesbrough will also be joining Sunderland in the Championship, and unfortunately they also have to get an F because the goal was to stay in the Premier League and they failed. Early on in the campaign, it looked like they were well equipped for survival, with Aitor Karanka's side tough to break down. However, the big problem was they couldn't stick the ball in the net themselves. Signings of Rudy Gestede and Patrick Bamford unsurprisingly didn't bring the goals they needed, and sacking Karanka proved too little too late, with Steve Agnew failing to have any real impact as Borough slipped back into the Championship without a whimper. Also going down to the Championship is Hull. If you could give managers a grade, then Marco Silva would have to get an A for his efforts and bringing Hull so close to survival after it looked like they were dead and buried, all the while looking like a cross between Colin Farrell and Adam Richman. However, the Tigers have to get an F because they failed to stay up. There was a glimmer of hope under Silva, but the Allen regime continues to cast a dark cloud over the club. Watford finished just above the relegation zone, despite never actually appearing to be in the relegation battle. A totally inconsistent side with an incoherent group of players, Walter Mazzarri did what was asked of him and kept the Hornets in the division, but still lost his job. A club with a sacking culture, how on earth can Watford progress if they had to chop and change every year? Congrats on survival, but it's a D for Watford. Next it's Burnley, and Sean Dyche's side is getting a B+. Had it not been for their shocking away record, it would have been top marks for Burnley, who survived against the odds. Burnley's survival shows just how far team spirit, hard work and togetherness can get you, despite being pretty much everyone's pick to be relegated at the start of the season. Swansea looked doomed earlier on in the season, after a tough start under Francesco Guidolin and then the embarrassing tenure of Bob Bradley. It was third time lucky for the Swans though, with Paul Clement becoming their third manager of the season and remarkably guaranteeing another year of Premier League football for the Welsh club. It's a C+ for Swansea because Paul Clement did brilliantly to keep them up, but we can't ignore how gutless they looked early on in the campaign. Another side who battled and avoided relegation were Crystal Palace, but we're not going to be so kind with our grading here, giving Palace an E for their efforts this season. With the talent they have, they never should have been in a relegation battle in the first place. Alan Pardew had Palace sliding towards the Championship as he showed exactly why Newcastle fans wanted him out for so long, and it still took Sam Allardyce until the penultimate game of the season to confirm their survival. Stoke City ended the season in 13th place, in what can only be considered as a disappointing season for the Potters, therefore they're getting a D. Mark Hughes' side failed to progress after 3 consecutive 9th place finishes and bordered on being almost irrelevant this season. Barely rivalling the top half but staying clear of the relegation zone, epitomising mid-table obscurity. Is that enough as they head into their 10th consecutive season in the top flight? Not sure. In 12th was last season's champions Leicester City, one of the biggest disgraces of the season. Last year they were everyone's second club, completing a fairy tale as they lifted the Premier League trophy against all the odds. This season, you could almost hear everyone rooting for the Foxes to go down after their treatment of Claudio Ranieri. While they did have a fantastic run in the Champions League, which saw them knocked out by Atletico Madrid, the fairy tale of the King Power is definitely over, and we're going to give them an A for their Premier League performance this season. And rounding out the bottom half was West Ham United, another team who had a disappointing season. It all looked rosy for the Hammers, moving into a giant new stadium and being linked with every player under the sun and keeping a hold of talisman Dimitri Payet. Instead they struggled in their new home, signed Gökhan Toure and saw Payet go on strike and force a move to Marseille. Slaven Bilic was monumentally let down in the transfer market, and West Ham get a D- for a forgetful first season in the London Stadium, which almost saw them embroiled in a relegation scrap. So that's part 1 of our Premier League grades for the season. Join us tomorrow for part 2 where we look at the top half. Let us know your grades in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.